heard three of the eminent speakers speak on cyber security, some aspects of public safety, and then disaster management. Of course, as disaster management hasn't really been covered, in much detail, and maybe so cyber security and public safety also. I think these are very, very wide kind of fields. But I am thankful to the three eminent speakers, you see. Let me talk to you more about, disaster management. Friends, like my previous speakers, I don't have the power of the PowerPoint presentation, you see. Nevertheless, let me try to pack some traditional power, through my voice or my body language into whatever I am going to say. See, as I said, I work in Patna with Bihar State Disaster Management Authority, which is a statutory body created by the Disaster Management Act 2005, passed by the Parliament. This has been a landmark legislation in the field of disaster management because this is the first such action taken by the country. There was no law on disaster management, even though this has been traditionally, and historically a part of the public administration ever since the public administration, came into being, you see. The Constitution of India also does not mention about the word disaster management, you see. That is very surprising. Even though you must have heard of relief departments in these states, there are relief commissioners who have been there. Of course, now the designations and the functions have been changed to a great extent. So that way it has been a very landmark development in the country. The Act also created the institution of National Disaster Management Authority. I'm sure many of you have heard of that, which is located in Delhi and it is chaired by the Prime Minister of India. It has a vice chairman full-time who is in the rank of cabinet minister, and it has 7-8 other members who are experts in various fields related to disaster management, and they all have the rank of Minister of State. And the National Disaster Management Authority is by and large vested with the responsibility to come out with policies, come out with overall plans, and more so guidelines and norms and standards for managing disasters, you see, in the country. Then the Act also created the institution of the State Disaster Management Authority, and now every state is legally bound, by the law to have a State Disaster Management Authority, which is to be chaired by the respective chief ministers and then other, members, etc. of the body, you see. The state of Bihar adopted the same pattern as that of National Disaster Management Authority. Unfortunately, the Act does not lay down a very clear-cut pattern. It has very general terms that there would be state disaster management authorities chaired by the chief minister who would nominate a vice chair and then some members, etc. But who would be these vice chair or members, that has not been really spelled out by the law, you see. But the state of Bihar decided to adopt and follow the pattern of National Disaster Management Authority, you see. So Bihar is the only state where there is a full-time working, vice chairman, that is myself, and there are full-time, 2 members. We have a secretariat and office of our own. There are many states in which these authorities have come up as kind of cabinet subcommittees, because CM is the chairman by law, and then CM they have nominated some ministers as the members, etc. So it has become kind of a committee structure which is not very, very sort of effective, you see. But nevertheless, I think India is a country, with all kinds of variations and patterns. It is said that we also live in different ages And you just heard our colleague saying that, even within the same state, what to talk of inter-state connectivities and, navigations, but even within the same state, you see, people are not really shaking hand, as it was said, you see. But let me again go back to the Act. Another important aspect of the Act is that it also created the important institution of district disaster management authorities. You see, hitherto, the district systems of preparedness and response to disasters have been led only by the district magistrates or the collectors, you see. And they had a relief section. But now this body has been enlarged, sort of institutionalized. It is headed by the district magistrate, but it is co-chaired by the Jila Parishad chairman, and then the superintendent of police, the civil surgeon, the chief medical officer, the executive engineer of the buildings department, and then many others, including civil society. They are members of the District Disaster Management Authority. I think which is a very, very good development. But they need to be institutionalized. They need to really grow. Their capacities need to be built, etc. You see. The last point which I want to talk about the Disaster Management Act is the very definition of disaster, you see. As I said, this definition did not exist ever, even though traditionally relief administration or disaster management has been a part of the public administration, for ages. But for the first time, disaster is defined as a catastrophic event or mishap, etc., happening because of natural causes or man-made causes or by accident or by negligence. And all those activities which have adverse environmental impact on the local area, you see. So that way the definition of disaster has become very, very wide and kind of open, from natural to man-made to negligence by accident, etc., etc. And many times I shudder to think of the challenge ahead, you see. Even natural disasters, which traditionally we have been sort of, geared to sort of managing. I'm not really saying managing, but sort of managing. I don't think we are really confident to say that the country is prepared to face natural disasters, you see. Be it the kind of, tsunami in December 2004 or the Bhuj earthquake in January 2001 or many other disasters, which have taken place, and add to that, things like, you say, the Mumbai, the attack 26/11 and things like that, whole host of things, you see, or it is air accidents, you see, or road accident. You see, they are one of the biggest killers in the country, and yet I don't think nationally, collectively, we are really being serious about, managing these traffic and road accidents, etc. There are the statistics which say that number of people killed in road accidents are much more than all other disasters combined annually, you see. And there are figures, you see. Many places I have been going in Bihar to different divisions where DIGs tell me that, sir, in my area, this thing is 3 times, you see, not just double of, combined to all other disasters, which is something very, very unfortunate. But I take some hope from the fact that we as a country and as a society have leapfrogged many stages of development sometimes, you see. And I hope that, with the IT, with the space technology, the remote sensing, the GIS, the GPS, the whole host of technologies, which have emerged, you see, and which, of course, are tremendous resource, provided we are really able to, use them, exploit them to the best possible advantage, you see. Maybe there would be solutions, for not just one disaster, but sort of many disasters, because ultimately, in the ultimate reckoning, a lot of things which we do for one disaster, they are also applicable for other disasters, you see. Now, how does that happen? Let me tell you. See, I don't know how many of you have really had personal experience of facing or being involved or managing a disaster, you see. I don't know how many of you have experienced, the 18th September 2011 Sikkim earthquake, you see, which was felt in most parts of North India. Those coming from South India, of course, would have only heard of it, you see. But I'm sure you have heard of, what happened in Japan in March 2011, you see. You may have also heard of what happened in Haiti and Chile in 2010, you see. Now, if we take a look at, what happened in Japan, you see. It faced one of the worst events of the human history, you see. An earthquake 9 on the Richter scale, which is literally unprecedented. Maybe just a couple of other events would have been of that magnitude, you see. And that was followed by a tsunami with 40 feet high, waves. And then the third disaster of nuclear plant, crashing, you see, kind of. You see. But do you recall, I'm sure many of you would recall, horrendous pictures, and videos which came on the TVs of this 16th March, I think it was 2011, of this event in Japan, you see. But what was remarkable was the way the society responded, you see. The way the people responded, you see. There were absolutely no chaos, no anarchy, no panic also, you see. I mean, it doesn't mean that people they faced it, but very peacefully and in a very orderly manner, you see. There were videos of NHK, which is their national media, which I remember, you see, where people are first assessing, looking at each other, then looking at the, other articles in their hall items, fans, etc., you see, or other things which are hanging, and then make an assessment as to how serious is the shaking, you see. Is it the kind of usual, because Japan keeps shaking like California almost every day, every moment, you see. And then when they realize that no, it is something serious, then they start taking the action, you see, of duck cover, going to corners and below some tables, etc. And something which was remarkable was that even in that situation, I could see that one employee, one staff, at the last moment, even as he's trying to go under the table, but was typing, the last bit of message, which he wanted to go for the broadcast, you see. Now, let me tell you apart from this, that no building fell there despite this kind of an earthquake, you see. And no people were killed because of the earthquake, you see. They lost about 25,000 people, but that was all because of tsunami. All the pictures of tremendous damage and cities and airports and, cars and ships, getting totally swept away was all because of the tsunami, you see. Even tsunami, they had been prepared but for an earthquake up to the magnitude of 8 on the Richter scale, but not 9, which went beyond their expectation, you see. In terms of economic damage, of course, they have lost, I don't have the figures, but I think it may even touch trillions because of their level of development. But then what is most remarkable is the way they responded, and including children, schools, homes, elderly people, old people, vulnerable people, people who are especially challenged, etc., all that, you see. Compared to that, if you look at Haiti, 2010 January, an earthquake of around 8 on the Richter scale, the whole country was, decimated. The presidential palace crashed, you see. The president was literally on the street, you see. He could just barely manage to save his life. They lost nearly 260% of their GDP, you see. And comes 2 months later on, in March, same kind of an earthquake in another adjoining country, in the same region, called Chile, you see. And there was almost no damage, you see. The event was of the same magnitude, you see. But no buildings, by and large, no people killed, no infrastructure lost, no public property lost, you see. No private property lost. So why did this happen? We have really tried to look into that, you see. And that is because 30 years back in Chile, they had another big event. And then after that, all those 30 years, they worked on many things, but two key things. One was public awareness and education. And second was safe construction, you see. And 30 years they went on doing that, whatever was required. And the result could be done. You go to Google, which I say Google Baba, who is too kind. You ask for one, it gives you 1,000 and confuses you, as to which link to really go. But any link you go with these, and I think you can get these statistics and a lot of details of this, interesting, at the same time, disturbing also, you see. But then if we look at India, you see, in Gujarat, you see, we were not at all prepared for the Bhuj earthquake, you see. And which is one of the better off states in the country. 1993, we have had Latur earthquake in Maharashtra, followed by 7 years of World Bank project, which did a lot for Maharashtra. And yet in terms of sharing of lessons, it was shocking. In fact, in 1997, Building Materials Technology Promotion Council of the Ministry of Urban Development, they came out with what is called a landmark publication called Vulnerability Atlas of India, which was based on 4 disasters: earthquake, cyclone, floods, and strong winds, you see. It gave district by district account of their vulnerability. It showed that whole of Bhuj district was in zone 5, which is the highest seismic zone in our country, you see. And despite this, the lessons from Maharashtra had not traveled to Gujarat. In those days, I used to work as the Joint Secretary in charge of disaster management in the Ministry of Agriculture, Government of India, you see. And on 26 January 2001, when the Bhuj earthquake took place, around 8:45 in the morning, by evening, in less than 2 hours, by around 8 o'clock, I was in Bhuj by the first Indian Air Force aircraft, which was sent by Government of India, along with 24 doctors from AIIMS and Safdarjung, and medicines and drugs, etc. And then from IMD, India Meteorological Department, you see seismometers, and then satellite phones from Ministry of IT, etc., etc. But our satellite phones did not work in the night around 2:30 when I had done my recce and was supposed to report back to my secretary, you see, as to what was the situation, you see. Because communication, which is of a great priority, but somehow is the first victim, you see. And 8:45 this event takes place, the communications go down. In the whole day, between that time and 3 o'clock, that was 26 January, Republic Day parade, etc. But 3 o'clock, when the National Crisis Management Committee met under the Cabinet Secretary, literally about a kilometer from here, you see, where the President's house is there and the Cabinet Secretariat is located. You see, the Government of India had no news about the severity and the magnitude and the extent of what had happened in Gujarat, you see. They knew from IMD that something serious had happened. That was on the media also, you see. But not in terms of extent, in terms of magnitude, in terms of, severity, seriousness. So how do you mount your response, you see? How much? It can be too less or it can be too much, you see. And that is when they took this decision that let somebody senior enough go and take a first-hand look and then report back so that the Government of India could really come back, with that kind of a situation, you see. Satellite phones didn't work, my dear friends, because the batteries were not charged, you see. And then attempts were made from Jeep battery and things like that, etc., etc., you see. Anyway, you see, now, I think in the last 10 years or so, there have been major reforms in this sector, coming with the Act and policies and NDMAs and SDMAs and DDMAs, etc. Talking of disasters, you see, let me give you a broad scenario that when a disaster happens, then one aspect is the immediate response, you see. How do you respond, which I was telling, where the communication is very important, where the corporate sector, the industry, etc., have a tremendous role to play, you see. I'm not elaborating on that, but I'm just saying I'm sure a lot of you can understand the kind of roles which it has been put to use in many countries, and I think we are aware of the potentials. It's a question of connecting and plugging together, you see. Going and talking at the national level. Of course, NDMA is doing a great deal of service. They have come out with about 30 guidelines. If you go on their website, that is all available, you see. Guidelines on various aspects of disaster management, you see. You go to various SDMAs, they have their, what they are doing, etc., you see. So IT, the response is very important, where information technology, communication, etc. But then power is something which is very important. Power goes down, you see, communication goes down because of that. That is one aspect, you see, response. Emergency operation centers are a very important aspect of response, you see. And we have to have state of the art, as it is said, emergency operation centers, because whole lot of agencies and departments and players, they are called into action, you see, in a major situation, you see. Whole lot could mean 30, you see. It could mean many more also, you see. In a Bhuj-like situation, you could be dealing with maybe 500 agencies, you see. Because there are teams who have arrived from maybe 30 countries. There are maybe 300 or more NGOs. This government of India on the, state government tell us what is the situation, what do you require, this and that. And the state government with all their departments practically, with police and fire and civil defense and home and medical, etc., all that. How do you coordinate that, you see? How do you respond in a planned manner? Do you again create another man-made disaster, you see, by messing up the whole thing, which is what unfortunately has been happening, you see. So that is one aspect of response, you see, which is very, very important. There are good practices and best practices, whatever you call them, across the globe about state-of-the-art emergency operation centers, where again power, IT, communication, databases, their security, cyber security, etc., which has been talked, they have tremendous role, you see, to play, you see. GIS, GPS, in fact, that is the way it can. You can literally zero down on any. If Bhuj, whole of that district, which is the biggest district in the country, was affected. Now, how do you go to Rapad, how do you go to Gandhidham, how do you go to another place and look at that and the various layers of infrastructure which has been affected, etc., etc. All that is possible, you see. But then the second very important aspect is of mitigation, you see, and risk reduction, you see. And risk reduction, mitigation, they are long-term things. Risk reduction, traditionally, you see, we talked of relief administration, then we talked of disaster management, but now globally we are talking of risk reduction, you see, which is identifying the risk in advance, assessing the risk, you see, analyzing the risk, you see, and then strategizing and making your plans to deal with the risk, you see. And I think that is where public awareness education, I think, is of tremendous importance. I keep giving a very crude example about the importance of public awareness, which seems to be a very soft kind of area. A lot of us here perhaps deal more in the hardware kind of things. That if somebody is standing behind me with a pistol and wants to hit me, you see, how do I take action to escape, or reduce that risk if I don't know about this risk, you see? I have to have a system, or I have to have the glass, of the James Bond, you see, who even looking in this direction is able to see what is happening behind, you see. So I think the very first step towards risk reduction or disaster mitigation is public information and education, which is where we in Bihar are trying to do a lot. I wish, now I'm thinking that I should have used some power of the PowerPoint by bringing to you some photographs and some snippets of what we are doing. But let me suffice to say that, we are focusing a lot on children, on women, on elderly people, on vulnerable sections of the society. We have taken a few decisions in our authority meeting, which are chaired by the Chief Minister, that every office in Bihar will have an office disaster management plan, which is started with a small exercise we were doing for our own office, and then CM said, okay, let it be done for all. The next step is going to be a home disaster management plan, on which we are working. So that is for streamlining. As far as the developmental process is concerned, our Department of Planning and Development has already issued a circular on mainstreaming. Let me just give you an example. 400 children were killed students were killed in Bhuj. Why? Because the school buildings fell down, 179 people, including patients, nurses, doctors, visitors, paramedics were killed because the district hospital just sat down like this in that earthquake. So the whole question is, do we need a development of that kind? Hospitals or the schools or roads or bridges, they are all milestones of development. I am sure we don't need any school. I am sure perhaps I'll appeal to you and request you, when you go back and you send your children to school, please sometime go to the management and ask them, is your building safe, Delhi is in zone 4. Most of you coming from various parts of India would know perhaps your vulnerability, your this. If you don't, please go to Google Baba or go to NDMA, or the SDM of your own state. They will advise you about your this, But do ask, some simple questions like, you suddenly fall ill, you go to a hospital, Do we ever ask that this building of the hospital, is it safe? Or is it a building like the district hospital of Bhuj, I'm sure you don't want to go to a hospital building of that kind, which will kill you rather than give you life, So friends, I will now conclude. I have taken a lot of time, though we are not exceeding the original time allotment of our session, by just saying two things, I believe a lot in terms of individual, preparedness, After 9/11, the Time magazine of 23rd June 2008, you can note in case you are interested, the cover page itself says how to survive a disaster. There are 3 case studies, but the summary is it says that in the time of a disaster, there are 3 kinds of personalities of everyone which emerges, First kind of personality is that in which people freeze, You just freeze. जो हिंदी में कहते हैं माथा सुन्न हो जाता है, you don't do anything. You are a mute spectator to whatever is happening, falling, something hitting you. You just don't know what to do. So you suffer. The second kind of personality is of those people who overreact and panic, And therefore you must have seen videos and pictures of people holding hands together and jumping from 10th floor or 30th or even 50th floor, They know what is going to happen, but they have panicked and they cannot control, their behavior, Fortunately, there is a third kind of personality also, which is of those people who know what to do, But they also know how to do. Because not just the knowledge part, but also the action part, is important. And how to do comes with training, mock drills, rehearsals and all that, That is something which you should be doing in your organizations, all the corporate sectors. You have to look into whether your BCPs, business continuity planning, business continuity management, they are there, they are really shared, there is a larger ownership of those plans, and whether they are practiced, through mock drills and such exercises from time to time, So let us all resolve that, we train ourselves to belong to the third category, where we know what to do and we also know how to do by practice and regular drills, etc. Finally, let me close by 2 slogans which we have adopted in Bihar. First is about preparedness and second is about long-term development. The first one is, आपदा नहीं हो भारी यदि पूरी हो तैयारी. आपदा is disaster. आपदा नहीं हो भारी यदि पूरी हो तैयारी. It can be serious, but it will not be too serious, you see, यदि आपकी तैयारी पूरी है. एंड सेकेंड इज विकास ऐसा हो जो आफत से बचाए. अगर ये विकास है एक बढ़िया होटल दिल्ली के सेंटर में, तो ये विकास ऐसा होना चाहिए जो हमें आफत से बचाएगा अगर अभी अर्थक्वेक आएगा तो. और विकास ऐसा हो जो आफत न बन जाए. उसे हमें ऐसे स्कूल्स और हॉस्पिटल्स एंड ये नहीं चाहिए जो कि किल करेंगे हमारे बच्चों को और पेशेंट्स को और रात दिन उनको लाइफ देंगे. So thank you very much for your very patient hearing.